There we go. So, evening, everybody. Catriona here from Slange, just to have a nice wee chinwag and quick catch up midweek, because there's quite a lot that's happened again, as there usually is at the moment, and I think it might be quite good for you all to know exactly what the story is. So I'll just hang fire for a moment and see who's coming in, and we shall start. So I'm just going to add my Instagram just to see how Instagram goes as well. And Instagram is always an issue. There we go. Oh, there we go. So tonight, some parts of Scottish history. And before I do that, I wanted to quickly go over the latest updates to do with Scottish tourism. Obviously, I'm not on tomorrow. I'm struggling to keep up with days at the moment. It's quite funny. So we've got a few things that are happening at the moment. We have tomorrow they're going to announce, the Scottish Government anyway are going to announce or put forward their kind of how this 15th of July is going to look in terms of reopening tourism here. So that will mean, if you're coming on holiday, accommodation providers, you'll have your self-caterings, caravan parks, they're all looking set to go, no problem. You'll have your hotels, your bed and breakfast, they're a little bit more concerned because we don't know exactly the framework and how that's all going to go down, because obviously we are dealing with a 2-meter social distance at the moment that we have to adhere to keep everybody safe. On top of that, they're talking about opening obviously a lot of the visitor attractions back in hotels and restaurants, and obviously operators like ourselves. Now, the issue that we have is that because of the social distancing, we don't know how that's really going to work in reality to make it viable for us to reopen. And the same will be said for a lot of the restaurants and pubs. So if you're coming to Scotland, you need to know exactly what's going to happen. So are you going to, go to the, a remote part of the country and then not have any pub or proper shop nearby? And is that going to be much of a holiday? Is that going to be a good enough holiday for you? That's really a big question that a lot of people are going to be asking themselves. Again, we're going to be going into this whole concept of the 2-week quarantine that's going to be imposed. We know a lot of the events that were planned for this year, like, in fact, pretty much all of the events have been cancelled. Hi, Helen. Hi, Graham. So that's going to be a major factor for people planning their trip, because now you're not just going to come to Scotland because, why would you? If you had all these plans to go and do as much as you could, Scotland is a big trip for a lot of people, so it needs to be worthwhile. So they've got all these kind of factors that we're going to look at. And obviously, tomorrow, we're going to be looking at what their framework is. Hi, Ian. So our plan, and I'm going to let you know it, it will all be published tomorrow in our update in our newsletter. Once we have received the framework in which we can work on and clarify a few questions that we may have, we're going to update you all in how we're going to work. So we are very much planning to be open in some capacity from the 15th of July. What does that mean? I'm thinking it's going to mean private tours for obviously more local people, and also walking tours. So there are certain things where obviously as a business have to put in place, such as obviously your safety is paramount. So making sure we have face masks, constant access as well to hand gels, and keeping distance as well, making sure that our vehicles are deep cleaned as well, making sure that they are properly cleaned in between tours, to make sure that there's no cross-contamination there or potential of cross-contamination. So these are big things that we are going to be doing and looking at doing. But again, it's all going to come down to, is it possible for us to do it? If they say to me, even as a private tour operator, you can't maintain social distancing, or if we have to have a bus at half or even less capacity, it stops becoming viable for our business to do it. We would basically just be working for nothing. So that's a really these are really important questions for us, and we will hopefully be giving you all an update tomorrow. So if you are not subscribed to our newsletter, do so if it's something that you're interested in anyway, and we will put it out to you tomorrow. We've also got our blogs, so we've got quite a few updates going on. So it'll be how we're going to work from the 15th. It will be our virtual tour schedule, our new one. I'm a little late with it because we're trying to play around with some timings. The Thursday time seems to be a little bit too early for most people, or maybe still a little bit too late for too many. So it's try to find that nice sweet spot, which we are intending to do at the moment. And obviously the blogs from the latest virtual tours that we've done. So I was online last night, finished at 1 o'clock in the morning-ish. And we were doing our Outlander day tour. So that was quite a lot of fun. We were doing, we had our drive-through. So I've been doing a lot of dash cam footage, going around, filming different roads and different trips, and then uploading it. So that was there. Hold on a wee second. I'm just going to answer some questions in here before we continue. Hi, Jenny. No problem, Amanda. You come back when you can. That's the beauty of Facebook. And we've got Jerry. I subscribed but never got the newsletter. I'll message you, Jerry, separately, and just make sure we've got the right address. It could also be that it's going to a spam folder. That's what happens sometimes with newsletters, because it goes out to a lot of people. If you have got special settings on your email server, sometimes they kind of just flag it, and it's just the way it is sometimes, even if you've subscribed. So it all depends on your unique email provider. I know like AOL, people like that are really strict. And I often get a lot of people going, what's happening? I'm not getting my emails. And I'm like, here, we're sending them. So we'll see what happens there. Hi, Johnny. Lovely to see you. And we've got Laura Ann as well. Missing you, New England girls. Am I right? We've got Tina in as well now. So, Tina, this is what we were just saying. Scotland is opening again for tourism technically on the 15th of July. That's supposed to be our opening date. However, that might change. You never know. We've got like second surges and things that are happening all over the world. They might decide that, closer to the time, no, we're not going to open. So we're kind of speculating a wee bit here, but that there is a plan in place, at least, or something. 2 seconds. I'm just going to put on the lights so you can see me a bit better. And then we're also going to be receiving a document tomorrow to look at the parameters and how that's going to actually look. So, for example, how hotels are going to open again, how pubs and restaurants are going to be allowed to open again, how our tour operators like ourselves going to open again. So it might all be all good and well saying, okay, Scotland is back up for tourism. However, it might not be economically viable for many of the businesses involved to open their doors. If I'm a pub, for example, and I'm a small pub, how can I have a 2 meter distance between patrons? It might be very difficult. In which case I'd have to probably sack staff, or there's a lot of questions that are going to come from this. So hopefully we'll be looking at that. I saw that, Tina, I saw in Florida, there was another second wave, they were saying, I think 2,000 more cases from what I saw in the news, and forgive me, it was very brief. I wasn't paying as much attention as I probably should have at the time. So there's a lot of these different factors. Also, there's a big problem with the UK at the moment is it's seen as a kind of COVID hub at the moment for various countries around the world. Excuse me. So whether they're even going to let you fly to the UK, that's going to be another thing, and whether this imposed 2-week quarantine is going to be enforced as well. We just don't know how it's going to look. So the way we're doing it is we're kind of focusing at the moment, doing our walking tours, hoping that we get a lot of people looking to holiday at home this year. So that's people from Scotland, people from England, people from Wales, the UK basically. So if you're local, come with me. I'll be doing my local walking tours here. I'll also be doing walking tours in Edinburgh. Hopefully everything there starts to ease. And also private tours. That's my kind of aim. Whether that happens or not, we don't know. It's all going to be dependent on tomorrow. So that's what I'm saying. If you would like to know what's happening in Scotland, you don't have to come on a tour with us. But if you just want to be, kind of keep up to date with everything that's going on, it's a good idea to subscribe to our newsletter, because we'll kind of put all the information out there so you have an idea of what's going on in the world and in Scotland in particular, and how we're going to be working tourism moving forward. So that's my little 5 pence. Today, hi Hope. I don't really know what that is, Hope, to be fair. Sorry. So the next thing, your parents live in Ardrossan, so you're not too far. You just come and stop in on my way. On my way? You can tell it's been a long day. On the way here, on the way there, sorry, you can stop in here and I'll give you a local tour. So that is one thing. Then we are going to be talking today about something that's quite relevant in the world at the moment, with all the kind of protests and the Black Lives Matters and things that are going on around the world, and quite rightly so. We are going to be talking tonight a little bit about Scotland's place in the slave trade and what we've done as a country, how we have impacted that. And I think it's an important part of our history that rarely gets discussed, if I'm totally honest with you. Scotland being the wee brother in this union of countries tends to be this little brother. So we try to look like we are always hard done by, and that we don't, have any real say, or we haven't been able to capitalize on certain things. And I think that it's important to kind of rectify that and kind of go into a little bit about how we have actually had quite a significant role in the slave trade. Not necessarily as a country, because remember, when this all started, Scotland had failed projects in their colonies. It's from when we joined with England in particular under the British that we really started to advance and utilize the English colonies to make money for ourselves. So that's a really important part, so that people understand the political makeup that put us there. Just quickly, oh, you're in California, so you can't just drive here, Tina. I'm sorry. So before I start, has anyone got any idea about slavery in Scotland, about our place within the slave discussion, the slavery discussion? Is this something that anyone is willing to broach, I suppose? And Gordon, Slange. This is my nightcap, to be fair. I have been very good. I nearly had a cigarette, and I never. So I won. I won this round. So instead I thought I'll have just one nightcap, so that I don't, I just don't want to go back the way and end up smoking again. I really don't want that. So, because we've got no questions here so far, or there probably is a bit of a lag, it's probably a good place to start in explaining why we are having this discussion in the first place. From a UK standpoint, remember Britain did at one point have an empire. So our empire was the largest in the world. It was nearly a quarter of the whole entire globe. It covered pretty much every single time zone. So we had North America, parts of North America at one time, Canada, Australia. We had, let me think, we had Africa, many countries in Africa as well. So we had this really expansive empire in Asia. How can we forget Asia? And Britain is famous in 1807, I think it was, to start the process of abolishing slavery. And that came from a significant pressure to government from many different people in power. Because remember, this is before every man could vote. So, this is really sticking to the elite here. But very influential people campaigned for it for quite some time, and eventually they gave in because they saw it as a barbaric, and they were totally right with that, totally barbaric system. And we thought that would be pretty much the end of it from a British context. Unfortunately not, in the sense that now I'm not going to get into any debates about what the American Civil War was about, because I'm going to have people with all different opinions coming in, and that's not what this is about. Ultimately, from a British perspective, we wanted to remain neutral within that conflict. We didn't pick a side. And the reason why we didn't pick a side is so that we could take advantage financially without getting into trouble by supporting one side or the other. And in Scotland in particular, Glasgow, pretty much the whole of the Clyde, although we had ships and we were building ships for a long time before it really boomed. The shipbuilding industry in Scotland really boomed, thanks to, yes, the Industrial Revolution, but also because of the American Civil War. And many Glasgow shipbuilders were actually supplying or building ships, I should say, for the South. And it was all about building faster, quicker ships and sailing them across. And many Glasgow captains or Scottish captains would go over and assist them in their endeavours. Some of them were even captured and were quite happy to spend 7 years in a Yankee prison. And then they came back to Scotland absolutely minted and were able to buy lots of different property, and have very nice, wealthy existences. This is also at the time with, I was talking about industry. This is also a time in the UK when, I was watching I told you guys this before, one of my favorite kids' TV shows called Horrible Histories, and my kids have been watching it the moment. My son is absolutely obsessed with it. And there's this one thing with Queen Victoria, and she's going, slavery is very barbaric. And then there's a 6-year-old going, should I go, what should I do? You're going to help me out? She's like, get back to work, because this is at a time where we have really, really, really poor living conditions, and poor workers' rights in the UK itself. So children from as young as 6 were expected to work. Living conditions in our cities were absolutely appalling. It was just full of squalor, disease, starvation, social problems, drink, violence, crime, all of these things that you can imagine, all in this kind of cesspool that was going on in the country at the time, not just in Scotland, but across the UK. But in Glasgow, it was a major issue. And in fact, quite recently on one of our politics shows, one of the Tory politicians, Jacob Rees-Mogg, made a comment that during the late 19th century, the mortality rate in a concentration camp was the same as the mortality rate in the city of Glasgow. So he was trying to say that the mortality rate under the British wasn't so bad in a concentration camp because the mortality rate in Glasgow was the same, whereas I saw that as like a double whammy. I was like, well, why were people in Glasgow dying so prematurely? Why was, child mortality so high? So you've got all these different factors going on. And what you will find, and this is an important part of the debate that I think people need to have, is that when you dehumanize a population like that, it's very difficult for them to empathize with anybody else. So when we're talking about helping out various factions and making lots of money off of it during the American Civil War, regardless of what they were fighting for, many people here were under the impression it was regarding slavery. They were happy to do it because it was a meal ticket out of their situation. And that's a terrible thing to say. However, if you look at the human element and the psychological element of that, I do a lot of genealogy, as you guys know, and when I'm looking at my own family tree or others in and around the cities of Scotland during that period, it was really tragic. You would have 10 children, you would lose 2 or 3, your husband would die of this, you would die. I mean, one of my ancestors died at only 22 years of age, and she died of consumption, which is obviously tuberculosis. And it was purely down to living in absolutely squalid conditions and not being able to properly feed and nurture herself. And she died, and that was it. Her young child was left without a mother. These things were widespread and it went across the board. So if you're living in that situation, it's very difficult to empathize with somebody else's plight and what they're going through. And it's very difficult to, very much when you're at the bottom, you are literally fighting over the scraps. And I know that sounds terrible, but that's just the way it was. You would literally be at the bottom fighting over all the scraps, whilst the elite were taking advantage of that particular position because it meant that they were not the ones doing the ill deeds outwardly. But at the same time, it meant that they could also subdue any potential unrest and problems that they would have to deal with. This is also the same time period that we're talking about the potato famine in Ireland. we had some really horrible, tragic things going on. And I think that that's a really important part in this discussion when we're talking about Scotland's place in the 19th century. It gets a little bit more dodgy when we allow certain places to be immortalized by those who benefited from slavery. My great whatever granny did in no way benefit from slavery, other than she had a really badly paid job from a very young age, and she didn't. Totally threw me off my point there. Okay, capto. Anyway, someone's burning something outside. Anyway, so it's, if you look at the people at the bottom, they didn't really benefit from it, other than possibly having some sort of employment, but not very good employment, if that makes sense. So you might have been doing some rope works, working in the rope works, working in a mill that was, dealing with the cotton. Or sugar. We have in Greenock, we have the sugar factories that were all here, and so that would all come in cane form. Guys, how did that get? How did we get sugar? I mean, it all comes from slavery, but the people working in it weren't necessarily having the best time of their life. But the guy at the top, who is dealing with that and making money off of it and profiting off of it with the nice houses that they built through Glasgow and through Greenock, and the street names and the legacy that they still have, is something that we do need to talk about, because they profited off of the backs of slavery. They also, we've got ourselves into a situation, I think, in the UK, where we don't have this discussion open and honestly about even just looking at the British Empire, and which was incredibly racist. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day when I was chatting about this chap I know was talking about Gandhi, and apparently there's calls for the Gandhi statue to be pulled down because Gandhi was racist. And his argument was, of course, he wasn't racist, but in actual fact, whilst he was in South Africa, now if he was to speak the way he did then, we would find what he said incredibly racist. And this was imposed by the British state, this sort of racist initial racial segregation. That was already in place. So although the British might not have been outwardly themselves, owning their own plantations or whatever and selling bonded people, they were essentially profiting off of it, but at the same time they were being incredibly racist because they thought that they were better and that Black people were less than they were, and that there should be some sort of separation there. And this runs all the way to modern day. So it really is a really important topic. And locally in Greenock, we have the sugar sheds here, and they are talking about opening and using it rather for a museum for Scotland's place within slavery. And I think that would be a really great thing to do, to actually see, to learn about these people who benefited and who profited off of this. And I think there should be some sort of reconciliation there, which in my honest opinion has never honestly and openly happened. And I think that that's a really important thing. So I hope you enjoyed that little piece of history for tonight. I don't know, has anyone got any questions? Before I carry on. Jay, that's a really good point. Yeah, they just didn't get their hands dirty. It was very, they're always very, everything's done in a civilized matter, but under the surface, there's nothing civilized about it. And it's a real thing that we should all be discussing right now. We should all be talking about what we've done to the world. Should the empire be celebrated? In my view, no, absolutely not. But then again, I was born in a country which was under the empire, and they have a very different viewpoint on the British Empire compared to here in the UK, which in a recent poll, the majority of English people polled did believe that the empire was a good thing. You will ask a lot of Indian folk as well. I did have a chat with an Indian guy once, and he said to me, well, it wasn't all bad because Britain brought them certain things like railways and things like that. But at the same time, they completely changed the landscape of the country, which had been quite happy for millennia before. And we did that because we wanted their money. we wanted stuff. So I find that really a really difficult one to kind of justify. Same in Africa. I mean, when I was down in Kimberley, there's a place called the Big Hole, and that was the largest diamond mine in the world. And when you go down there, they discovered diamonds again in the 19th century. And when they discovered diamonds, that's what kind of started, really, when they really started to find diamonds there, that's what started the Anglo-Boer War, because the British came and went, no, actually, we want to come up here. We don't just want our Cape Colony. We want this stuff up here. And that's what set off the Anglo-Boer War. But that's for another day. I could go on and on and on and on about different history. But this is under the British, and many people came from Britain and went over there to hack at the soil and get hold of these diamonds. And, some amazing diamonds were found down there. And they used a lot of black workers who came for money. So they weren't slaves necessarily, but they certainly weren't treated very well. And there is a story there, and I was literally in tears hearing about a Zulu king who'd come over and who'd rescued two white, I think they were English, obviously this is De Beers and all of them, rescued two white guys who were injured in a mining accident. And he was forced, like they demeaned him by, making sure they weren't stealing anything. And it was just an awful, awful thing, really, to go into somebody else's country and say, well, actually, this is mine, and anything you find here is mine, and I'm going to use and exploit the people here to get what I want, and then I'm going to try and play it off that I was actually doing them good because I brought them civilization. I think that that's a terrible thing to think, and I think there's a lot of things that this whole debate has brought us, not only just with obviously outing slavery, because it's a terrible thing, and it's a really, really, it's a massive issue actually, and I'm hoping that they do get some something in place to get a really good museum here to show you Scotland's role, especially during the Industrial Revolution. And in Greenock we had obviously the main port, so we were bringing on all the tobacco, sugar, cotton, like everything was coming in here. We had the main tax and excise office here, so everything was then getting taxed here. A lot of our people went over to the Caribbean, and apparently the majority, I can't remember the exact figure, but so many of the plantation owners during the slave trade itself, during when slavery was at its kind of prime in the 18th century, the majority of slave owners in the Caribbean were actually Scots and of Scots descent. That's why if you go to Jamaica, you'll find in places like this, you'll find they've all got Scottish names. So there is definitely something that we should be doing, and as a people we do need to apologise for, because we have inflicted a lot of pain and suffering in our past. And it's all good and well to say that happened a long time ago, but it's really important, even from a Scottish perspective, when I'm talking about history. I want people to acknowledge what was wrong in the past. I'm not wanting you to tell me that you're individually sorry for what, 10 generations ago did. All I care about is that you just acknowledge that that was wrong, and you're going to do your best effort that nobody ever has to endure that sort of treatment ever again. So I think that that's really what we're trying to do now, and hopefully as we move forward, we'll start to learn a bit more about that, and a bit more about Black people within Scotland, and celebrating the Black people of Scotland a bit more than we already do. Although in saying that, I really need to make this last point. Scotland as a country, really, in real terms, is a pretty tolerant place, nowadays anyway, I find. To the point that the city of Glasgow was very important in helping and campaigning for the release of Nelson Mandela in South Africa. And as such, when he was released, he came to Scotland and he was given the key of the city of Glasgow. And they've actually renamed where the old South African embassy was in the city centre. They've now called it Nelson Mandela Place. So we've got things that we are trying to move towards, but it's just not enough. I think there needs to be something said about each person so that we understand, you're celebrating this guy. Why are we celebrating this guy? Who is this guy? Who is this chap? Why is he on a horse? Why is he on this big plinth? Why should we be celebrating him? Okay, well, he discovered X, Y, and Z, or he did X, Y, Z. He won X, Y, Z war, but what else did he do? Okay, well, he had several plantations, or he was very, very important in the movement of different peoples, or whatever that might be. I think we need to start having that discussion, and so that we make it right, so that people from now moving forward understand that it's not okay, ever. So there you go. So I think that's going to be me for tonight. I just thought I'd give you my 2 pence about Scotland history, a wee bit about slavery. I don't want to go into too much and get anyone's back up, because I know it's a very touchy subject for certain people around the world. But I do think that from a Scottish perspective, and for a global perspective, I mean, I'm behind the whole movement anyway. But I do think that we do need to open our minds a little bit and understand and empathise and sympathise with that situation, and just say, no, it's not okay. So there you go. That's me for tonight. Tomorrow I will be putting out that newsletter, as I mentioned. So if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you want it, that is. We'll also be doing our virtual tour tomorrow. However, I'm going to probably let you know in the morning when I'm going to schedule it for, because it's just not the right time. So I might move it, just in case you want to book it. Don't take the time for face value just now. Friday I'll be back for our ghost story chat, and Saturday we'll be back for a wee pub quiz. So in the meantime, thank you all for joining me. And if you have any more questions and you watch this later on, just put your questions in the comments and I'll get to them. And I hope you're all going to have a lovely day or a lovely evening wherever you are in the world. And I'll speak to you all soon. Take care. Bye.